gents, and everything else. My name is Audrey IG Flowers, and welcome to the Completely Fucking Clueless podcast.
My name is Sarah Alice Liddy, and we both use she, her pronouns.
Slay.
You guys, what an exciting week it has been over here at CFC. Our team, us two, has been very excited because
we were in the New York motherfucking Times, bitches!
I cannot believe it.
Honestly, me too.
I know. My mom keeps telling me this is a really big deal, and for some reason it's hitting, but it's also does that make sense?
Absolutely. It's a big deal to me and not at the same time.
I think because, okay, you guys, so we've been teasing this for quite some time now. We kept saying
we did it in January.
Yes.
And they kept being like, no, it's coming out in 2 weeks. And we were like, how? This is a long 2 weeks.
Yes. So we did this in January, literally end of January. And how it started, because I've gotten some questions about it because I posted about it on my TikTok. People were like, how did you make this happen?
We didn't.
I don't know is the answer. I do not know.
The answer is kind of TikTok.
Yeah, the answer is definitely TikTok.
Someone probably a year ago now on our TikTok asked us for a 20s book recommendation.
Oh, is that how we did that TikTok? Wow, okay.
And the only book that I knew about your 20s was The Defining Decade.
But you have been a preacher, not but you have always preached to people
because it's a good book to read in your 20s.
Yes.
And I have to give credit where credit is due because she requested credit way back when this happened.
Oh.
Julia Perry. She's the one who introduced me to the book.
Julia Perry.
All credit goes to Julia Perry.
This all leads back to Julia Perry.
Everything leads back to Julia Perry.
I bought The Defining Decade. It was funny because when they reached out to us, I had the book. I had never read it because
my mom was really like, I think Sarah's finally going to have to read the book. And I was like, yeah, I guess I know what it takes to get Sarah to read a book I've recommended. We are going to be, we have to be interviewed by the New York Times about it in order for me to get her to read it.
Literally 100%. It was funny because basically, I think I was just at my kitchen table, or maybe that was the Spotify dinner. I don't know. But
I was sitting on this couch.
Yeah, we got an email from the woman who wrote it. Her name's Emma.
And every other thing, I initially was like, this is a scam. And so I went and looked her up on LinkedIn, and I was like, no, this is a real person. And it's an @New York Times email or something like that.
Yeah. And you ended up talking with her the night that she emailed us.
She emailed us asking to chat. Yes. And I was like, yeah, when next week works? And she was like, actually, can you talk tonight? And thank God that we got it when I did, or that she replied quickly or something, because I was about to take an edible.
That would have been great. That would have been fab.
Thank God. I think I got distracted cooking or something and didn't end up taking it. So we end up talking on the phone. And initially it sounds like sort of a panel thing. She even asked, do you have other friends who have read it?
Yeah.
What would they be interested in talking about it? And I'm like, yeah, totally. I have friends. I can find out. And she was like, cool.
Yes.
And I'm like, okay. Next day, she calls me again.
Yes, in the morning, right?
In the morning.
Yes.
And she doesn't say this explicitly, but the context clues she's dropping are suddenly very different. Of hey, do you and Sarah want to get lunch with the author Meg Jay and me for an interview? And she asked us some background questions and whatnot.
Yes.
And so I think I texted you being like, you need to read the fucking book.
Yeah. You need to read the book. Audrey was like, you need to read the book. And also I had a call with her.
Yeah, she called you a couple hours later.
Yeah. And we were talking about it, and I had started to read it. And she was like, how are you liking it? She asked me some questions about myself.
I did feel bad. She asked me about the romance section, and I was like, and here's the thing. I hadn't read the book in a year and a half or two at that point.
Right.
So I didn't super remember. And I'm going to be honest, I totally threw you under the bus. I was like, you know what? I think Sarah would be a better person to talk to about
Well,
that.
it's funny because I ended up I think because of that, I think you told me that.
I did tell you.
And so I started with the
so
love
I didn't
section.
Completely fuck you over.
Yes.
At least warned you.
Yes. And I did. I really focused on that. And then in my call with her, she was like, oh, are you guys comfortable being photographed and whatever? And I was like, oh yeah, we do photo shoots all the time. I wasn't even processing that we were going to be getting our photo taken for the New York Times. And so then I texted Audrey about the call, and I was like, oh yeah, they asked also to take our photo. And then we were like, okay, so we're going to lunch with this woman from the New York Times, the author of The Defining Decade, to talk. They want to take our photo.
We were like, this seems
legit.
Yes. And we were like, it was still, because initially it seemed like other people were going to be involved. So we were like, let's not make a big deal about this. It might be nothing.
Yeah. It ended up being so cool.
It was so cool.
It was so cool.
We did such a long shoot with them, which is so funny.
I know that photo shoot is hysterical.
The number of she was like a fantastic photographer, and it was so much fun. But the number of times she said one more photo was in the hundreds.
Yeah, and so basically how the day went was we started off.
I got my first blowout ever for this.
Yes, I got a blowout too. I was like, gotta look good for these photos.
Yeah, because this happened very fast. We got that email Thursday night, and the interview and photos ended up being taken the following Wednesday.
Yes.
So I panic ordered some clothes because I was like, I don't own fucking anything that's worthy in the New York Times.
I know. I got a pink blazer super fast.
I had to go out. The bra that I'm actually currently wearing is the only actual bra I own that fits me because I was like, all of my bras don't fit me and give me over boob. And I was like, I can't have over boob if I'm going to be in the New York Times. So I went out, got an actual fitting bra.
Wait, that's so funny because when I walked in today, Audrey wasn't wearing her shirt. She was just in her bra, and I was like, "Wow, she's wearing a bra. Like, she must have gotten a new bra."
Only bra I own that actually fits me. All of my other bras don't even close to fit me.
That's hysterical.
Panicked ordered clothes. They got in Tuesday night.
Yeah,
when we had the shoot on Wednesday. And I was so panicked because the tops that I had picked didn't end up working out. And I ended up figuring something out, but I called a bunch of people in a blind panic being like, does this look good? I'm going to be in the New York Times and I want to look good.
It was crazy. Yeah. And then we ate at this really amazing Greek
that
place.
I really do want to go back to.
I know. I wish I don't remember the name.
It must be in our group message. Yeah.
Oh, yes. That too.
It might even be in the article. Oh. Wait, no, they say what area we're in. They don't say actually what restaurant we were at.
Which I thought was interesting, reading the article in the area that we got, lunch in is an area for people who are up and coming and trying to, make their dreams come true. I loved that. But yeah, we got lunch with her and the author and we just had the most amazing discussion.
Casual. It was so low key.
Oh my God. She was so Meg. And from this, the interview's right after this portion, but we got to speak with her twice and she's just so lovely, and I feel now connected to her.
So I'm going to say in advance, if I seem out of it in the interview, it's because I super was.
Yeah.
It wasn't that long after my grandmother, and I'm going to be honest, I wasn't doing well. To a point, I think actually Meg kind of said something.
Yes, she did. It was so not so
and
funny.
I felt so embarrassed.
It was yes, because you walked in and I could immediately tell from your energy.
Barely got there because I think we'd already had to reschedule once for when I went home when my grandmother was sick. So I didn't want to reschedule again. And I'm gonna be honest, the most zombie-like I've ever been.
Yeah, it was interesting. I think at one point she was Audrey was
because I'm very talkative. She'd already spoken with us. Yeah. She knew I was very talkative.
Yeah, and I was like, oh no. I was like, what's happening?
I was so embarrassed, and I'm so sad about it because I really do admire her so much. And
it's okay.
I'm gonna be honest, I don't remember a single thing we said in the interview. In the original one that we did in the restaurant, I remember.
Yeah,
I don't remember any of that. So it's gonna be interesting for me. I haven't done the edit yet, so it's gonna be really interesting for me to listen to.
I remember at the beginning I effed up, I couldn't remember the name of something and I was just thrown off. I almost felt like I was in a musical and I had forgotten my line. I was so fucking embarrassed.
I was utterly unhelpful. I think I maybe said 15 words in the whole thing.
It's okay. We made it through.
We did.
And
but so in advance, I'm gonna seem weird, and it's because I am.
I think there's things to take away. I mean, she's such an amazing person, and getting to sit down with her was incredible.
Read the book. Read the book.
Highly
Even if you're out of your 20s, read the book.
Also,
it might bring a little bit of panic because it is very much get your ass in gear, but
I think in a good way.
Yes.
Yeah, I think in a good way. Also, she talked with us about she will read the emails that people send her about
and
the
reply,
book.
And they'll be like, "Wow, I didn't think you were going to reply to this."
Yeah. So just saying. But she's really nice, and yeah, the lunch was amazing, and the food was really good. We got to figure out the name. I'll put it somewhere on Instagram.
We'll find it. I wanted to go back because I remember being this is, and I remember getting full and being sad that I couldn't finish.
Yeah, it was such a cute restaurant.
It was. I remember also being trying to eat really carefully because we had the shoot not right after we came back here real quick, but we had the shoot afterwards, and it was I put so much time into making sure my makeup looks good. I can't fuck it up.
I know. And then Audrey said, the shoot, we thought it would maybe take 30 minutes. I bet these people are busy. Shot, go. 2 hours later.
My like face hurt from smiling, and it's so funny because like we only ended up ever seeing the one photo that's in the article,
Which I think is so funny that was the photo that they chose
of
all the photos.
Like so many different poses, so many different places, like so many different things.
I was like, what? And like we were so exhausted by the end of it that we like needed sugar, and so we went and got cake after.
Oh my god,
that cake! Oh my god,
was really good.
I actually have a video of it. I'm gonna finally post like a vlog on my TikTok of like the day, and I have like a video of me eating the cake.
Same. I got home and I literally like I think I ate my cake and immediately passed out.
I know.
I was fucking exhausted.
I'm honestly gonna be in that area today, so I may make Olivia go and get a piece of cake with me. I love cake. It's like my favorite dessert. Yeah, but what a like incredible experience that we got to have.
Like I'm gonna be honest. As you all have known, been going through a rough time. But you know, I was considering getting back into dating, and this article was why, because I was like, my life may be a mess, and I may have to admit that on these days. But I can go and be like, guess what? I was in the New York Times a week ago.
You guys,
does that make me a little insane? Yeah.
Yeah, I had an interview on Thursday, and she was like, of
course.
How was your week? And I was like, this has been a crazy week. I was in the New York Times, and she was like, no way. And she was actually genuinely like interested in like, and I was like nervous that it came off a little bit like braggy, like off the bat, but I was just kind of being genuine. Like it's been really crazy.
A really crazy week.
Like, so this is our new personality trait.
Yeah, I'm not gonna ever shut up about it. I am eventually gonna get it framed and hung up in my apartment.
I hope one day that we get like a studio and we can hang it up there.
Obviously.
Yeah, it was such a cool experience, and for like, thank you guys for listening and following, especially on people who follow us on TikTok. Thank you, because
she went through a bunch of people's TikToks and like she told us that was how she found us. She looked up Defining Decade on TikTok.
Yeah, so TikTok can make your dreams come true, like there. So yeah, we hope you enjoyed this interview that we did with her. We both still have to listen to it, and
I've been postponing it a little bit because I know I'm going to be embarrassed.
You know what? It happens, and I feel like she, out of all people, would understand. She is a therapist. I imagine if you sent her an email and was like, "Hey, like, I just wanted you to know, like, this is where I was at that day," she would respond.
I honestly might.
Honestly, I feel like you should. Honestly, wait, that was such a great idea.
Yeah.
Like if it's
Look
like
at
weighing,
us giving advice.
I know. If it's
to
weighing
ourselves.
to ourselves. If it's weighing on you, like why not? There's like no like. I feel like she's just like, and that's how therapists are. Like I just feel like they're nice like that. You know, they're good people. Slay. All right, you guys. We hope you enjoy our interview with Meg Jay. Go check out our New York Times article. Go read The Defining Decade.
The name. What is the name of the article so you can find it?
The name of the article.
Like something about the something youth.
The patron saint.
A voice of reason to help you with your 20s is the name of the article in the paper, but online it's what's the point of your 20s? Ask the patron saint of of striving youth.
We are not the patron saint of striving youth. We are the youth that she is
we
helping.
We were referred to like as mega fans or like disciples or something like that.
We were also something about being like miscombobulated youth.
Yes.
I was like,
oh yeah. Do you want to hear the best? I would love that. This is. I hope this is what I'm remembered for in history.
I feel like you and JC Marie. Hopefully one day when we meet them, like you have to be like tell her about it.
A real quote from me in the New York Times is: "Sometimes you've got to be in your flop era because the slay era doesn't mean anything if there's no flop era."
Slay, 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 slay.
And I certainly know about flop eras, baby.
All right, you guys, here is our interview with Meg Jay. Hello, clueless people. We are so excited because today we are going to be chatting with, I've been referring to her as the 20s guru, but she is better known as the author of The Defining Decade, Dr. Meg Jay. Meg, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. As I said, I've had a really long day and I was looking forward to this as a fun way to end it. So I'm really happy to be here.
What did you have going on today?
I saw 8 clients back to back.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
my mom is a social worker, so I get that life. Yes.
You get it.
Yes.
Yep. You've seen the glazed over look at the end of the day.
Yes, 100%. And she actually works with 20-something women. So I get to hear a lot about, what that life is like for her as well.
Oh, cool. I Did I know that? I don't think I knew
I
that, but
don't know
that's
if we
very
talked
cool.
about it back in
Yeah.
January. For everybody listening, we've actually gotten the opportunity to chat with Meg before, and it was absolutely incredible. So today we actually have a lot of questions and thoughts from our listeners to kind of give them a chance to have, your advice and ears.
Great, 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 great.
Yeah,
Well, whatever would be useful for them to hear, let's talk about it.
amazing. So, kind of to get into it, I think right now at least on TikTok, the 20s as like a decade and a concept are like this huge like fascination for a lot of people. I see so many 20 somethings posting about like their struggles and their hardships, and then you also see people in older decades, reflecting on their 20s like what I wish I would have done and sharing that. What do you think the fascination around the 20s, like where does it come from? And where do you feel like your interest in this specific decade started?
Yeah, so I think my interest started in the same place all the fascination comes from, and I'll
Yeah.
rewind to before my time.
Yeah.
50 years ago, at 21, people were married, they had a baby, they had a house, they had a career, or they worked at home, and whatever. And so life was sort of settled, like people settled down. It's hard to imagine, again, before my time, but believe it or not, it was only about 50 years ago. So maybe like
Yeah.
y'all's grandparents, probably not your parents. But anyway, in the last 50 years, but especially across the last 20 to 30 years, so within my time of being an adult, the quote unquote developmental milestones, the adult milestones moved up. So now average age of marriage is pushing 30, average age of first baby is 30. You'll get ready for this, brace yourselves. You're going to have 9 jobs on average by the time you're 35.
Oh my God.
People find career stability in their 30s. They buy houses. Average age of first home ownership is at all-time high of 36. So all that stuff people used to have at 21, they now have closer to like 30, 35, or they start to have. So it's opened up this space that kind of like literally didn't exist
Hmm.
40, 50 years ago in terms of like what you would do with it, or all, and just kind of a new space of how do I put this together? What do I do with this? So that's led to a lot of conversation, a lot of fascination, and also a lot of stress and anxiety around all the uncertainty, because people settle down later than they used to, so they're very unsettled. I mean, there's a lot to feel like, whoa, is my life ever going to work out, and how do I make that happen? So
Yeah.
all that has kind of unfolded in my adult era. I kind of saw that firsthand as a Gen Xer, and then it's continued with Gen Y, Gen Z, and it'll just continue. It's not generation specific at this point. It's really age group specific. So like 20 something specific. There's a
Yeah.
chunk of time, and there's like a whole bunch of ways you could put it together. And that's a lot for people to try to figure out. And it can be very anxiety provoking.
Yeah, 100%. I'm sitting here and I'm thinking like even though there all these milestones have moved backward and there is more time, a part of me is curious as to why, us 20 somethings feel all this, stress and pressure to figure out something and make it happen when all these milestones have become later. Do you have an idea as to maybe why?
Um, I mean, I think the message has come down partly, you have me to thank or not to thank for that. The message has come down that it doesn't like magically appear, when
True.
you're 30, that you kind of have to put those things together to have, the adult life that supposedly used to be handed out on a silver platter. I don't know if that was actually true or not, but it's definitely not true now. And so people get a sense of like, shoot, my 20s really matter. There's this lady over here calls them the defining decade. So I probably should do something with that time. And I think there's also an internal wish and desire for, I want some stability. I want some
Yeah.
certainty. I want to put these things together, because being sort of free floating sounds fun. But pretty quickly, it starts to feel like I said before, pretty anxiety provoking. So I think people want to start putting life together.
Yeah, I agree with that. I was actually talking with somebody last night because I was explaining how we were going to be doing this interview today. And they were talking about, we were talking about your book and some of your concepts. And one of their questions that they asked me to bring up was, that you talk about identity capital in your book, and I'm blanking on the other word. Identity capital and
Weak ties.
no, weak ties, yes, but let me see. Hold on one second. It was like capital versus. Hold
Oh,
on.
identity crisis.
There we go. Identity. Thank you. A capital versus crisis, and you know how do you build the capital when you still feel like you're in a crisis in your 20s?
Well, actually, the capital is the cure for the crisis, to stick with the
Okay.
C words here. So, because part of being, identity crisis is like, oh my gosh, I don't know who I am. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know if it's going to work out. Crisis is like a period of like instability or change. But when
Right.
you get out there and you build just one piece of identity capital at a time, and you get many pieces, like I said, on average, 9 jobs before the age of 35. So you're going to have lots of different pieces. But when you build those, that's sort of where the stability comes from. That
Okay.
may be difficult for some of your listeners to imagine now. But after you have, a good handful of pieces of really solid identity capital within, then you feel like career wise, work wise, even personally, that you're settled, even if your job is going to change. I was talking to an old client of mine actually just a few days ago. She's in her 30s now, and she's on in another job right now. And she said, yeah, my
Mhm.
job keeps changing, but I am the same. I mean, that my career identity is pretty set, but maybe this company gets bought by that company, or this company goes under, or I decide to move across the country. So those pieces of capital are sort of where we get that internal stability, that no matter, jobs can change, economies can change, but what we have goes with us everywhere.
Yeah, that's very true. I feel like a lot of us 20 somethings, I know we do this a lot. We get kind of wrapped up in the crisis of it all, in the, I don't know what's happening. But it seems just like you said, in order to get out of the crisis, you kind of just have to keep taking those small steps forward.
Yeah, I might be, this isn't quite what you're saying, but it made me
Yeah.
think of I think it's a Winston Churchill quote, but I'm re-quoting something someone quoted to me, that it's something like, if you find yourself in hell, keep going. Just sort of meaning like, keep moving.
Yeah.
The only way out is through.
Yes, there you go. Even nicer. So, so so yeah, I think they're part of that, all the uncertainty and the wish for stability is like, I want answers. Like, if I know
Sure.
who I am, then I'll know what to do. It's
Yeah.
actually usually the other way around, that most people, I know you're not here just to talk about jobs, but we're started with identity capital. So
Yeah. Let's do it.
most people wind up in jobs that they'd never heard of when they were in college, or in jobs or positions that didn't exist.
Hmm.
So this idea that at 20 or 22 or 24, we can ask someone like, who are you going to be when you quote, grow up? They don't actually know. You haven't met the future version of yourself. And that thing you end up doing and loving, you probably haven't heard of it yet. I mean, you might be headed in the right direction that feels authentic for you. Like when I was in college, I thought I wanted to go to grad school in psychology, but I really didn't know if I would wind up being a professor or a researcher or a clinician. And I definitely had never heard of specializing in 20 somethings, partly because it wasn't a thing,
Right.
because the age group wasn't a thing. And really, one thing that launched that was, in a part, the defining decade. I wrote the book because I thought, 20 somethings, they need a good book. I had a lot of 20 somethings in my office, and I was repeating myself and having the same conversations. So I love to recommend books. So I went to Barnes and Noble to look for a good book. there none existed. This would have been like early 2000s. So I thought, well, I guess I'm going to have to write it. And if you go to Barnes and Noble now and look on, there's like a section that says like 20 something. I mean, there's a whole section now.
Wow.
And back when I was looking, there was no section. There was maybe like a couple of, kind of silly books. So anyhow, so my point on that was I did not know that I would be doing this now, even though I kind of
Right.
headed in a direction that felt true for me. That you kind of have to figure it out through doing things.
Yes, I agree. I agree. I feel like currently right now in my life, I'm in this space. It's funny when we were talking in January, I felt so like kind of confident with where I was at. And like, look at it now, like 2 months like later, I'm like, oh my goodness, like, is this like gonna happen for me and all these things? But I think your story is very reassuring. I know for me, and I imagine for anybody listening, that it is sort of about putting the different pieces of the puzzle together, and eventually that puzzle will figure itself out. It's just going to take some time.
Right. But you
Yeah,
don't, there's something to be said for, self-reflection and like talking to friends and family and looking
sure.
within, yet you don't, after a certain point, there's nothing new to reflect on. You just have to go out there and try some things and go, oh my gosh, when I was at grad school, turns out spending 7 years on statistics was enough for me. I was ready to move on and not be a researcher and be a clinician. But one way I learned that was by living that for a few years, which has served me well in terms of being, like research oriented and research
Yeah.
informed, which is in my books a lot. But anyway, there's a German poet, Rilke, and the short version of one of his passages is, don't look for the answers, live the questions.
Hmm,
And a lot of my
I love
clients
that.
have questions of like, I don't know what I am, I don't know who I am, I don't know what I want to do. And we talk about it some, but a lot of what we talk about is how can you get out there and have some experiences that help you live the questions. That's where the answers come from.
Sure. What do you recommend for your clients when they do come to you with these questions of like, I don't know what to do, like, where do I start? Do you have any tangible things that you tell them to get them going?
Well, it would depend. Like, are we talking about
Let's say it's like a job. Yeah. Like I think a lot of the stuff I hear, at least, we talk about is kind of honestly around career stuff. Like, I don't know which path to go down, or I don't know if I should take this job or if this job is going to lead me to where I want to get to in my life.
hmm. Fortunately, the paths, like, it's not sort of, if I had the right metaphor, that would be good, but I don't have it. But, it's not like a water chute where you pick one and then like you're going to go down the
Go,
chute and you
sure.
can't, change. So, I usually ask people what makes the most sense for them now. What do you
Okay.
think, feels the most authentic or the most useful, or where you're going to learn the most identity capital, and just start there and give it 6 months, give it a year, see what you learned, and then you readjust.
Reassess.
And that's where the 9 jobs by 35 comes from, is that young
Wow.
people are constantly like, okay, that wasn't it, or I learned everything I'm going to get here, now I'm going to go over there. That's normal. So it's remembering that this is not a one, especially with career. I mean, maybe some people with relationships, might like to find one person to spend their life with, and
Hmm.
that's awesome. It's probably not going to go that way with your career. So any choice, it's just a temporary choice. um, but I'm a big proponent for, learn, grow, challenge yourself as much as you can in your 20s, because no one expects you to know everything. So enjoy that,
Yeah.
because eventually you're going to get to the point where you're it, and people do, you kind of stop learning and growing in the same way as before, unless you're really, kind of pushing yourself.
Right, right. Did you have any, reflecting on your 20s, did you have any, monumental maybe experiences where you felt lost and uncertain? And how do you think you like found your way through that?
Um, oh, I don't know if I had any monumental ones, but I
Mhm.
think I probably felt lost and uncertain like the entire time. So it was
Yeah.
sort of a steady burn.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, my general path, which for people, I wouldn't assume everybody or anybody, any of your listeners have read my book. So after I graduated from college, I spent 5 years as an outward bound instructor. So that's
Right.
like, outdoor education stuff, which was definitely part exploration, but also part commitment for me. And that I was really committing to sort of learning a lot about leadership and working with
Mm.
groups and special populations. So even though it sounds like a very flaky thing to do, it actually, there was some thought there in terms of I need to challenge myself. And,
Yeah.
every single day I was challenging myself to handle really difficult situations and all that stuff. So I did that for 5 years, but it was probably supposed to be about 2 or 3. And then
Got
like,
it.
then I looked around and realized like, oh my gosh, it's been 5. So I better pivot. Um, and to pivot, I needed to take the GRE. I needed to do applications. I needed to not be sleeping in the woods. So I went and rung up health food at Burke in Boulder. I moved to Boulder because I was like probably near, I don't even remember now, and was like, oh, I'll just go get an apartment there. Rung up health food while I studied for and then crushed the GRE so that I could like
Dang.
go
Yeah.
go to grad school. So my point is like I was not it wasn't like every single moment was this amazing productive moment of clarity. It was really just I need and want to do this. I need and want to do that. Then I
Yeah.
went through the whole grad school rigmarole. Um, that was a rough several years, but it was something I needed and wanted to do. Um,
Right.
so I mean, I would say I I felt just for me, I probably was fortunate enough to feel like this is the right direction for me. It wasn't like I was thinking maybe I should be an accountant or maybe I should be a poet. Like I wasn't really having those thoughts, but
Yeah.
I didn't really know how this was all going to actually look on the other side
Right.
the whole time. I mean, I wouldn't say I had like a full sense of it until pretty consistent with the data until probably my mid 30s. I was like, all right, this is my career identity and this is who I am. And I've been kind of there ever since.
Yeah, I relate to that a lot. I think, when I graduated college and I kind of came out of it not wanting we both got our degrees in performance in music theater, and so I came out of it being like I'm not really sure if that's the route I want to go down currently. And I remember both my parents just being like so freaked out about it. But actually a couple weeks ago I was at dinner with my dad, and he was like, I think it's when you explained it to me that you were still going down a creative path and entertainment route, but it just wasn't that specific route, at least for right now. And honestly, when he said that, and hearing your story kind of brings it to life for me that, like, you know, there kind of like you said earlier, many different paths in like one big niche, like, psychology, mental health, there's the clinical, the research and whatever. And as you figure out, who you are and what you like, you kind of figure out how to narrow in a little bit more.
Yeah. And part of why I'm a big proponent of in your 20s, learn, challenge, grow. Your learning curve is like directly proportional to your earning curve in your 30s and beyond. And by earning, I don't just mean money. If I was all about the money, I would have gone into finance, not psychology. So, but it's more about like earning options, flexibility. So, I really learned a lot in my 20s and pushed myself all through grad school to have the widest variety of clients or really challenging cases, you know, statistics, clinical work, internships in hospitals, like as much kind of as I could learn and grow while that was still like my role. Um,
Right.
and then ever since I've had my degree, I've done different things because, so I guess what I'm saying, in some ways I've narrowed, but in other ways it's constantly changing. So I've had
Mm.
times where I've had, 40, 50 clients a week. And then I've had times where I'm just writing books all the time, or I'm consulting with companies, or I'm going on semester at sea and teaching classes. I mean,
Yes.
you never really know what I'm going to do next. It's in the realm of 20 something mental health because I love it. And that's like where
Hmm.
that's my why, the meaning of how important that is. But you never know what I'm going to do next in that space.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Which
mean,
is fun.
yeah, no, that sounds incredible. I feel like it's interesting like hearing your story because it's, you got to the point of like 20 somethings, but within that, you still get to live this life where things are changing and sometimes can be uncertain. I mean, a huge reason why we started this podcast was because we both kind of sat down and realized like, yes, we feel really uncertain in our 20s, but as we've learned and talked to people throughout, like the uncertainty never stops. Sure, some things can get a little bit more certain, but truly life is always kind of throwing things at you and you're adjusting and changing and figuring it out.
Yeah, and that's where it kind of comes back to, the identity capital and I mean that both personally and professionally of that
Yeah.
what gets really settled is yourself of like,
Mhm.
okay, well, if I stop doing this, I still have all these skills to come over here and do that. Or,
Sure.
that I'm the constant, even though careers changing, life's changing, states maybe change, whatever could be changing. But that, and I know it is true that as you get older and you make like the big defining decisions, you get more career clarity or relationship, family, where you're going to live, like it becomes more settled.
Yeah.
And that is nice. Yet you also feel like, well, whatever happens, I can manage it because I'm settled inside.
Right.
And I think the hardest part about being in your 20s, it's the most uncertain time of life because you're not settled on the inside and life isn't settled on the outside. So you got
So
none of
true.
that. And that's the hardest part.
Yeah, so true. As we're sitting here talking about this, I don't know about you, but I'm like, I know I'm not like 100% settled on the inside.
I'm I feel some days I feel like I'm maybe racking in at like 3% some days. Some days that's all I've got.
It's I mean it's an unsettling time in and out, and you just developmentally wouldn't have had the experience or like the skill set or it's like all the stuff that you go through to be like, okay, I got that, or okay, I could get through that. Like you don't have that yet. That's normal.
Yeah. Yeah. So speaking of like kind of, the interim being in our 20s, something we talk a lot about on the podcast is when we graduated college, we came out and there was this huge like wide open world where you're not in the structure of school and you don't have different authority figures telling you where to be and when to be there. And so sometimes you not sometimes a lot of the time we'll talk about routines and kind of building your life in your 20s. Is this something that you talk about with your patients? And how do you recommend, 20 somethings go about, sort of building their life for the first time out of these very structured lives that we've had, with school and college?
Yeah, I mean that's really part of the giant shift from more
Yeah,
certainty to uncertainty, because in school and like in if someone went to college, there were syllabi and it said this is what you do, this is when
right.
you do it, and this is how you get an A or a B or a C, and it's all very sort of clear, and someone else has decided for you. And then you get out of school and it's like, oh, I guess I write my own syllabus.
Yeah.
But I'm not feeling like an expert in my field. So it's difficult. I mean, I think you kind of start with what you can. I I mean, this is why I will almost never work with someone who doesn't have a job or isn't willing to get one, because
Okay.
it's extremely difficult to feel like you have any structure if you don't have anywhere to be ever, and
Right.
to feel like I'm figuring stuff out if I'm not sort of taking some responsibility for my own bills or finances, whatever. I mean, but works out because turns out most 20 somethings need to work. So it's usually not a big issue. But if I'm working with someone and they're like, yeah, I don't have a job, then that's the first thing that we do. And I don't really have a horse in the race of like what it is. Of course, I want like the more learning, the more growing, the more identity capital. That's the one I would vote for. But I mean, most of all, people like they need to be somewhere, like you need to feel like there's a reason, like somebody knows whether or not you get out of bed in the morning.
Yeah.
Hopefully more than just your job, but it's a good place to start. And I'm also really big into healthy routines about sleeping. I work a lot with college students who just have the worst sleep on the planet. So, and seem to have like forgotten that like sleeping in some sort of predictable way is really good for you. So, they think I'm a genius when I tell them to go to bed at a decent hour and get up at roughly the same time every day. Then like suddenly they feel better and they just think it's amazing. So, the things like having a good sleep schedule where you've got that 2 hour window of you go to bed and, so whether it's 11 to 1 or 12 to 2, and then you wake up, same, 2 hour window in the
Hmm.
morning, even on the weekend, not like sleeping till 1 on Saturday, because that like throws everything off and then you have to
Right.
reteach your body. So, routines around like learning to cook and like having some kind of, like, yeah, I come home and I turn on a podcast and, I whip out my 5 ingredient cookbook and just there's like a lot of small ways that we can feel like I do have a structure, I do have routines, or I see my friends every Tuesday night for cocktails or pizza or whatever. But it's such an unstable time that I think, I don't know, fortunately or unfortunately, but just the way it is, a lot of that has to come from you. But
Yeah, I
usually, if
agree.
you have work and life and responsibilities, like, life gets structured pretty quickly.
Yeah, yeah. I remember when we graduated, I started babysitting because I sort of was like, I just need something to like give me some sort of structure. And I reflecting, like I remember I hit the 6 month mark of like babysitting and I was finally like waking up early and stuff. And I was like, oh, like I kind of have a routine. But at the beginning, I was like, "Oh my goodness, my sleep schedule is all over the place. I'm not making money. I still can't cook. Maybe I'll learn one day." um, but it's such a daunting moment when you graduate college and they don't really tell you at school that you're going to be like thrust into the world and you're missing all the structure that you knew about it.
Yeah, I mean, if I had my druthers about college, we would spend a lot of time on a lot of other subjects.
Oh yeah.
Besides, besides, like, we go down some like serious rabbit holes in college of things that are never going to be needed. Yet, you know, and I mean, I work at a university where people feel like they need 3 majors and 2 minors, and like, sorry, no one cares. Like, that's not actually going to help you in life. It would be much
Yeah.
better to have one major, but have time of like put, weightlifting on your schedule, like take a weightlifting class or, an art class and develop a hobby or, of course, personal finance or learning to cook, a basic sort of mental health class for everyone. I mean, this is honestly what people need. But we're sort of in this culture where we feel like we need 3 majors and 2 minors, none of which ever really get used.
Yeah, yeah. I have 2 younger brothers that are in college right now, and I talk with them a lot about, like, not do well in school, obviously, but I was like, if I could go back and change something about my college years, it would be, like, not obsessing over the grades and all of that because I've like you said, realize that in this real world, a lot of that doesn't really matter as much as I thought it was going to, or as they tell you it's going to.
Well, I think the confusing part is that game is how you get into college more than ever
Yes.
before. I was just gave a talk over at UVA last week, and I said,
Hmm.
that game is how you got here, but that is not the game to play for what comes next, because
Yeah.
then you've loaded yourself up with a bunch of accolades that don't quite translate unless you're like trying to go to a really competitive graduate school, in which case you are still on that. But as y'all know, being out in the real world, what often goes a lot further is communication skills or
Hmm.
personality or leadership or risk taking or, um,
Sure.
you know, the, like kind of some of the more quote unquote soft skills, and just personally feeling like I feel like I have it together, or I feel like, I don't kind of go through the world feeling like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to do anything. I mean, which is a very common way to feel, but it would be nice if colleges didn't like launch people out with that feeling.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Kind of switching gears, another thing that a lot of our listeners will write into us about, and I never have good advice on this one, is making friends in your 20s, making new connections. I've kind of been fortunate, or maybe not fortunate, to I grew up right outside of New York, and so I still have like all my high school friends, and then like Audrey, a lot of my college friends moved to New York. So, what do you recommend when Audrey, what do you recommend when people come to you about like wanting to make new connections in their 20s?
Yeah, so that's really important. And I think, I mean, friends are so important all throughout life. I mean,
Yeah.
whether you're, even and especially when, you're older and maybe have a partner or a family, you still need your friends. You can't put it all on your partner and your family. So friends are really important throughout life. They're especially important in your 20s, partly because of that kind of adult milestone thing that happened where people used to have a partner, in their early 20s. And so there
Mhm.
was a go-to person of, I need to go to the ER, like I know who would take me, or I want to go out on a Saturday night. I know who I would go with. And so now people are, statistically speaking, not likely to have a romantic partner for that purpose. So friends are really kind of like the secure base, like the primary attachment figure of your 20s. So they're
Right.
they're really, really important. Now, some people are good with one good friend. Some people, they want 100. So it depends on you of what you need out of friendship. But yeah, also back to the college thing of, there are fewer structured opportunities. There's not like a club fair in
Right.
January in downtown, wherever you live, that shows you all the clubs. So it's more on you. But my best advice for people is to kind of get out there and you do you, live your life. And that's where you'll meet people like you that likely share your interests. So
Mhm.
if you're a road biker, get out there and road bike, or CrossFit, or knitting club, or wine tasting, or whatever. That instead of, I think, putting too much pressure on, oh no, I need to go find friends, it's more of go have a hobby. Hobbies are really great for your mental health and enjoyment. It's great to have something in life you can do any weekend or any week to like be happy or enjoy or feel like you did something cool. So go do your hobby, go do your thing, and you'll meet like-minded people that way. So that's and it's, I hate to say it, but it's not just your 20s, because you're probably going to move. I mean, I live in Virginia now. I moved here when I was 37. I had to make friends all over again, start all over again. But you kind of do the same thing. You go live your life and you meet other people who are living similar lives. That said, you can also do, don't forget about the weak ties route, where
Yeah.
you kind of have the courage to say, hey, I just moved to Sacramento, and my friends my old roommate's sister lives there, and I'm going to call her and see if she wants to have coffee, and just kind of make connections that way. But that, you definitely have to put the effort in. I have clients or students who will say, well, I don't want to text anyone because what if they don't reply? What if it doesn't work out? I wait for people to text me, and I'm like, well, I don't really know how you're going to make friends like that. So you're going to have to get over it and just take the initiative.
Yeah, no, it's an intimidating thing to try and make friends. I'm not good at
I've made,
it.
I think, one friend who isn't a friend of a friend since moving here, and it was through a class.
Uh-huh.
But I remember I literally bragged about to my mom about making my one friend.
There
And
you
I'm
go.
still proud of my one friend that I've
Yeah, you
made.
should.
Shout out to Aislinn.
So you took a class and
Mhm.
y'all connected on that.
Yeah, we only were in the same class once, and then I don't even know which one of us, but we ended up walking towards the same train station. We're like, "Let's get coffee." It took us, I think, 5 months to actually get coffee because we kept
Uh-huh,
having to
yeah.
reschedule, but we made it eventually. So,
You kept going.
yeah,
Good.
just gotta ask someone for coffee. Most people will say yes.
Yes. Well, that's they've done, fortunately, some very recent and cool research about the likability gap that most people think other people like them less than they do. If you talk
Mm.
to someone in a class or at a cocktail party or on the bus, and we think like, oh my god, they hate me.
Yeah.
But it's, according to the research, they don't hate you. They actually probably like you more than you thought. And so most 20 somethings are in the same boat of people need friends, they want to have good interactions. um so I actually asked a really smart, charming student who I love a lot. Like last semester, he was talking about, social anxiety and feeling like he has a hard time sort of getting out there and talking to people. Yet he comes across as very like, I get out there and talk to people. I said, well, wow,
Yeah.
you're doing something you're saying is really hard. And he said, I've just learned to sort of assume the best, like to stop worrying about me and just assume
Mm.
the best in other people. To just think like this person probably is nice and wants to like me, and I'm just going to focus on that. And it's usually true.
Yeah, yeah, I think a lot of the time, like, we just, like, get in our heads about things. I mean, I talk about that with my own therapist a lot about, "Oh, what if this person is thinking this about me or that about me?" And she's like, "Most of the time, people are not thinking about like, they're thinking about themselves, and so you don't have to worry as much about what people are thinking about you."
There's somebody sent me some post or whatever. People send me stuff like this all the time, as you can imagine. So it said something like, when you're 20, you can't stop worrying about what other people think about you. When you're 40, you stop caring what other people are thinking about you. And when you're 60, you realize no one was ever thinking about you.
There you go.
And I would say, I mean, I'm not 60 yet, but I would say that trajectory generally holds that. But
Okay.
it's really, it's normal. Like people, evolutionarily speaking, you need a group. I mean, there's safety in numbers. We need like a secure base, a clan. And you don't, like, you're sort of between childhood family and sort of adult family, whatever that's going to be for you. You're kind of between. So people need friends in their 20s. They're looking, and the fact that they're anxious about it shows that they care. That
Yeah.
that this is like, whoa, I need this matters. So then you have to take the next step and say, okay, I need this, it matters, so what am I going to do about it?
Mm.
What healthy risks am I going to take?
Yeah, I like that a lot. Speaking of like sharing things, another thing on like TikTok that I see a lot about specifically like 20 somethings talking about is it's kind of going back to career stuff, but the idea of like being successful enough, especially like in your, mid early 20s. Um, and so my question is, what do you think of that mindset of, being successful enough or having it all together? And how would you suggest shifting that perspective?
I'm like trying to wrap my head around what you're saying. So the pressure is like,
Yeah.
Are
So
you
I don't.
successful enough, or are you
Yeah.
do you have
Yeah.
everything together in your mid-20s?
A lot of people like will come on TikTok and talk about like feeling successful enough or like I don't have it all together. And, I know those mindsets aren't very helpful, but I mean, there's definitely times in my life where recently where I'm like, you know, I don't feel successful enough, or I don't feel like, I'm doing enough to, have something to speak for. And so I'm just curious if you have any like mindset shifts around that.
Hmm. I mean, I think if a client were saying that to me, I would want to understand what they mean by enough and,
Mm,
enough compared to what. So if it's like, well, I wanted to be further or I want to get somewhere faster, I would want to
yeah.
understand that of like, well, okay, does that mean you need to work a little harder and go a little faster? Or does that mean you're putting some pressure on yourself to be somewhere that's you don't actually need to be yet, but you're headed there. A lot of
Mm,
people, it's some of that certainty. We're like, we want it like be done. And that, careers unfold over time. And so, there's often like you don't get that sense of completion or like, put a fork in it in your 20s.
yeah.
So, I guess I would really want to understand what they mean by enough. And, oftentimes what people mean by enough is I don't feel like enough compared to what other people are doing. And
Yeah.
then you just got to forget that because, compare and despair, it's, unlike in school where everybody went along with the same assignments and the same grades and you theoretically could compare yourself to other people with some metric, in life that there's no metric that compares my life to your life. I mean, they're
Right.
so completely different, and that we're individuals. We've grown up in two completely different worlds just by being different people. We want different things. Um so I guess I would really want to understand what someone meant by enough.
Yeah.
Um, and maybe just in doing that, uh, that could kind of help them not necessarily slow their roll. Cause I mean, I think sometimes you got to listen to like, well, what is, is this a healthy sense of like, hey, I have strivings and hopes and dreams and I want to work on those. It's like, great, you do that. But it's not helpful to feel like you've got to have completed those by now.
Yeah. Yeah. I think at least personally, and I think you would agree with this, I think the compare and despair is a huge part of like being in your 20s. And especially now with social media, it makes it really challenging, with people posting, and you always know when somebody is like getting a new job or, reaching another milestone. I know this morning I opened my Instagram and saw some people I know reach a milestone, and like it shifts like your energy sometimes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, I think, it's a normal I'm always going back to like it's normal, it's developmental, it's evolutionary, and it
Yeah.
is, yet it's been social media is what actually is an example of what's called an evolutionary trap, where it's a
Oh.
normal evolutionary instinct to sort of look around and compare yourself to other people, like, am I okay, am I where I should be? I mean, because how else could we kind of know, like how we're doing in life?
Right.
But we used to could compare ourselves, way back in caveman days to like 10 people, and we just needed to sort of be in the group, not on the outside, because then
Yeah.
that's unsafe. And then, as time has gone on, we can compare ourselves to more and more people. And then with the internet and social media, I mean, it's just like we can compare ourselves to just, hundreds, thousands, millions of people and constantly getting data on that. So it's really hard not to look at it and react to it. And, that's where, no big surprise, I tell people, you really have to figure out how you're using social media and what you need to do to have a healthy relationship with that. Because every time you see that information, you're going to have that evolutionary response. You can't stop, you can't help it
Mm.
than to go like, oh no, what does that mean about me? And then even if you talk yourself down from it of, oh, my therapist said, or I heard Meg say, or whatever, that's great, but your brain has to do that work. If you have to do that
Right.
work 2,000 times a day, that's a lot on your thoughts and feelings.
Yeah. 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 I mean, social media is tough. And when you first came out with the book, do you like obviously social media is probably one of the biggest differences in 20 somethings. Do you feel like 20 somethings from when you first came out with the book and then today, what do you feel like their differences are?
Yeah, that's interesting because the first edition of the Defining Decade came out in 2012, and then
Yeah.
I wrote the update, and that came out in 2021. So when the book came out in 2012, there was a chapter, this will date it for you. There was a chapter called My Life Should Look Better on Facebook.
Right.
Back when people were on Facebook, it was like the Stone Ages. So, but what was interesting about that is that was, I say this not to like toot my horn as much as to show how quickly things changed. That was one of the first places that anybody wrote about social media and its effects on 20 somethings.
Interesting.
And because I saw it in real, like I saw it in real time. That was back when I had, 40 patients a week and they were all in their 20s and they'd come in and say, I think I'm going to join this thing called Facebook. And then the next week they'd come in and they'd say, I hate my life. And so I saw it happening in real time from I'm a person who's never been on social media to now I'm on social media. And then we were constantly talking about Facebook all the time. I mean, especially
Right.
what other people were doing and how that looked. And when I wrote that chapter, um, I had to really dig for some data because there hadn't even been time for there to hardly be any studies on it yet. Because you got to collect the data and blah blah and whatever, it takes time. So this was really early days. And then of course when I wrote the update in 2021, it's like no duh, everybody knows that you're going to go, it's the compare and despair and upward social comparisons, and it's really a challenge. And so I mean it went, so I, the 20 something brain on social media has been a part of 20 somethings almost the whole time. Well, maybe not the first 5 years or so I worked with them, but beyond that.
Hmm.
But so now what was what was a new thing then is just now obviously omnipresent. And I guess the silver lining is, believe it or not, is that I do feel like everybody knows that this is tricky business. It's like
Right.
fast food, it's like smoking, it's like whatever that you're going to really have to pay attention to how you're using it, how much time you're using it, in what way you're using it, what effect it has sort of on your mood and your life. And so I don't really have to sell that anymore. Everybody knows that. Um,
Right.
but it's a matter of, well, what are you doing about it?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, as a big social media user, it's tough. And I like to think that I've gotten some better boundaries around it. As you said, as we've learned that a lot of people have learned that it is very addictive and can be very, effective on your mental health and all those things.
How have you sort of decided to kind of manage it or use it wisely?
Yeah, I mean, I had went through a kind of tough period in my life, like mental health wise, when TikTok actually first came out. So everyone kind of knew me as the person that like wasn't on. I didn't get a TikTok until like last year, and of course now I'm like very into it and I make content on it. But I think when I feel my mental health like depleting, that's kind of like the first thing I go to is social media and trying to get off of it. Or just like not spending as much time like mindlessly scrolling in my bed. Yeah, cuz
Right.
I think for me and like many other people, you scroll in your bed and then you're laying in your bed all day and then at the end of the day you're like I've done nothing. I haven't even gone outside. So, with working with my therapist, I learned that like on a weekend, if I'm not doing anything that day, like that's amazing. But like getting out and going to grab a coffee or going for a walk will do me a lot better mentally than just scrolling all day because I think that's resting.
I mute people a ton, and it's never anything against them, but like if I notice someone brings up something like negative or jealous or like cruel within myself, I just mute them. They don't need to know. Like if they make me like they bring out something bad in me, I just mute them. Like I don't need to see it. I've muted probably hundreds of people at this point, and it's nothing against them. Yeah. But it makes it so I can go on and not have like as horrible as a reaction.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's something, we all have to kind of take responsibility and, some control over our own social media of like how much time, in what way, who we
Right.
listen to, who we look at. And, I talked about smoking, but this will also date how long I've been working with 20 somethings. When I first started working with 20 somethings, they smoked. Like no one really smokes anymore. Cigarettes. I mean, I know they smoke everything else, but like people used to smoke cigarettes. And so I had a client who was smoking like a pack a day, said, I really want to quit. But when you're in your 20s, the health effects of smoking are like not tomorrow, right? So it's kind of hard to, Anyway, long story short, she quits. And the first thing she noticed was how much more time she had in her day. Because every time she would smoke a cigarette, so that'd be like a 5 or 10 minute smoke break. Because that's how she would use them, to like take a break. And so 20 cigarettes in a pack, that we're talking about 200 minutes a day on smoke breaks. That's, 3 hours-ish a day on smoke breaks. And I tell my clients or my students this, they're like, that's crazy, 3 hours a day on smoke breaks. And I'm like, all right, pull out your phones. See how much time you spent on TikTok yesterday in little tiny 5 and 10 minute chunks that turned into like an hour and a half. And so like very quickly they're like, okay, we get it. But so for me, like, yes, there are direct effects on people's mental health from comparing and despairing. I mean, that directly affects you. There's also the indirect that you mentioned of if you're doing that, there's something else you're not doing that might make you happier. Seeing a friend, going for a walk, getting your errands done. I mean, there's a lot of other things that people would have done with that time that maybe, so it's kind of a double whammy.
Yeah, that's a good outlook. I've never thought about like the times that I'm sitting on social media like for hours, like the stuff that I'm not doing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's to me, I have even like more, I get a kind of more on, because that's sort of indisputable, like whether or not some people are like, yeah, I enjoy, scrolling and this and that, and it's how I relax, whatever. Okay, fine. If it's not having negative effects on you in that directly, great. But 3 hours a day, there's a lot of other stuff that you might have done that with that time that does make you happier and healthier.
Sure, for sure. Well, as we're nearing the end of our time, we have one last question for you that we ask all of our guests. So,
Oh man. Every time I get to this, I feel like I should have done my research and found out what this question, this comes up a lot. And I'm always like, why am I never prepared for this?
Because they're always at the end of the episode.
I always put it at the end. Sometimes I'm like, should I put it at the beginning as like a conversation starter, get her going? But I don't know. So the question we ask everybody is, since our podcast is called Completely Fucking Clueless, we're curious, when is a time recently that you felt clueless?
It can be big, small, like struggling with taxes.
Yeah.
I imagine you probably don't struggle with taxes anymore.
I'm struggling with
That's what I had recently is struggling with taxes.
Right. I farmed that struggle out to someone else at this point in my life. Yes.
One day.
Yes, it's cut one day, gals. You also will farm that out. It's great. Okay, I'll be super honest. I felt completely fucking clueless, off and on in the last couple of months. I'll tell you what it is, and then I probably need to say no more. I have a teenage son, so that probably speaks for itself. But it turns out the son of the defining decade lady is also a human, and he is going to develop the way he's going to develop. And he hasn't read my book, and even if he had, wouldn't take any of my advice, I'm sure. And I definitely feel as clueless as every other parent out there of, how do you most help your kid be who they want to be and need to be in the way they want and need to do this, yet also try to sort of help them how you can. So I feel completely fucking clueless as a parent all the time. And I will never, you can mark my words, I will never write a book about parenting, because I often feel clueless about that. And I'm the first to admit it.
I have 2 younger brothers. I remember their teenage phases.
My nephew just turned 10, and I'm really dreading when he becomes a teenager. Like, I can already see the Steins starting to show, and I'm really dreading it.
When I was on semester at sea in the fall, and I had both my teenagers with me, and it was so funny because there's 520 somethings on the ship, and every time I leave my room, they're like, Dr. J, can I get a minute of your time? And my teenagers are like, get away from me, Mom. Don't give me any advice.
Sometimes I feel bad with my mother because she's a social worker.
Yeah, there you go.
I will go to her and be like, Mom, like I need your help. But then I'm also will be like, can you stop therapizing me?
Right. Yes. So they were looking around at like, who are all these people who want my mom's advice? It's so bizarre. So,
so funny.
So yeah, I feel clueless there all the time.
Yeah. I love that. Well, thank you so much for sitting down with us again.
Yeah.
This was so amazing, and we're so excited for all of y'all to watch it. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. It was a really, really fun way to end the day. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to our interview with Meg Jay. We hope you got as much out of it as we did.
Yes. Oh my gosh. What a cool experience. I'm still just like so giddy about getting all these opportunities with her.
No, it's still absolutely insane. I'm like, I'm not qualified in any way for any of this, but okay, thank you.
But we did it.
We did it.
Woohoo. All right. If you guys love what you are hearing on CFC, do not forget to follow us on Instagram at Completely Fucking Clueless.
And TikTok and YouTube at Completely FCKING Clueless.
Period. We hope you all have an amazing Tuesday and an amazing week. And don't forget to be motherfucking clueless.
Go read The Defining Decade.
Yes.
It'll help.
Go read The Defining Decade.
I cried.
I loved it.
Yeah.
It was so good.
I think actually I don't have a copy currently because I think I've lent out both my copies to people. I probably need to see about getting this back. I think I left both mine out. I think one to Liz and one to another friend.
Who's in the city now?